Hey guys, welcome back to A Pinch of Patience. I am so glad that you're here. So this recipe that we're sharing today is really great for those of you who are like do it ahead type people. If you are a freezer cooking lover like I am, maybe you like bulk batch baking, or maybe you're just a busy mama and life just gets so hectic and you don't have time to do homemade meals all the time. This recipe is for you. Or if you just like bread, like I do, this recipe is also for you. This recipe is basically for everybody, unless you're on a special diet or something. But today I'm gonna show you guys how to make just basic dinner rolls, but I'm gonna show you how you can make them ahead of time, freeze them to then bake up fresh on whatever day you want to use them. So this is a really great recipe. I hope you guys really enjoy it. All right, so you want to start off with 4 tablespoons of softened butter and 2 cups of warm water, not super hot, just warm, and then a cup of milk. I'm using whole milk here, but any type of milk is fine. And then you'll also need 4 tablespoons of honey. Now, I never measure out my honey. I just kind of eyeball it. I just think it's such a bother. It's so sticky pouring it into measuring spoons and trying to scoop it all back out. So I just kind of eyeball it. You can do the same, or you can measure it if you feel more comfortable with that. But you want to just give this a stir, and then we are going to kind of microwave this in increments until it's warm enough to activate our yeast. So I'm going to put this in the microwave. And we're just going to put it on for a few seconds here at a time. So I started with 25 seconds and then just giving it a stir in between. It is very important to do this in increments so that the heat is evenly distributing throughout your bowl. But you want to do it until that butter is all melted and everything is nice and warm. But you don't want it scalding hot because that is going to kill your yeast that we're going to add it to in just a little bit. Once your butter is melted, we do want to make sure this is the right temperature. You want it to be around 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a thermometer, I just always stick my finger in there for about 10 seconds. And this is a trick my mom taught me. She said, always just see if it's a comfortable temperature for taking a bath or shower in. If it is, then it should be about right. If you found that you accidentally made it too hot, no worries. You can just let it cool on the counter until it is the perfect temperature. Next, we'll want to add 2 tablespoons of yeast to a mixing bowl. I do have a stand-up mixer here. I find it to be much easier mixing up my dough, and I'll explain that a little bit more in a second. But you're just going to add your wet mixture that you made here into your yeast and give it a little mix around. Make sure all the yeast is in there, that there's no clumps sitting on the bottom of your bowl. Kind of try to get the yeast that's on the edges or the sides of the bowl as well. And then cover this up, and we're going to let it set for 10 or 15 minutes and just let that yeast dissolve. All right, this has been sitting, and as you can see, look at all those lovely bubbles that happened when our yeast activated. This is awesome. All right, we're gonna make our dough. Now, my mixer comes with a paddle attachment and a dough hook, but you're gonna want to start with a paddle attachment first, just because when it's so liquidy, the dough hook really doesn't do any good at all. So we're gonna start with that paddle. All right, so I am adding 2 cups of flour to start, and then also 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm just gonna pour that salt right on top of my flour when I add it in. That way it's not directly touching my yeast mixture right away. So just sprinkle that on top of your flour, and then we're gonna go ahead and turn this paddle attachment on and get that going. Now, our goal here is to add around 6 cups of flour, but flour is a funny thing because people can measure it differently, or the humidity in the air can be different in different places. So I always just add 1 cup at a time and mix it in, and you may need less than 6 cups or you may need more than 6 cups depending on how your dough ends up. So I am actually alternating between all-purpose flour and bread flour. I do like to mix those two sometimes for my bread. Bread flour just has a higher protein content, which creates more gluten. So, but I do like the fluffiness of all-purpose flour as well. So I do just half and half. You could do all of it with the all-purpose if you'd like, or all of it with the bread flour. This is just what I've found that works out best for me. Once your dough is stiff enough and it's kind of holding up well, you'll go ahead and switch over to the dough hook attachment. And you can totally do this by hand. If you don't have a stand-up mixer, that's all right. You can mix up this dough by hand. You will have to knead it when it gets to the kneading process. I love that this machine just kneads the dough for me. Just keep stirring this and keep adding your cups of flour. Don't lose track of how many cups you've put in. Remember, we're aiming for 6. And I want to make sure that each cup, after I add it in, is mixed in before I add the next one. So as you can see, I'm waiting to put this one in because we still have dry edges around the bowl. The dough hook does not mix as quickly as the paddle attachment, but it does mix it more properly for bread than what a paddle attachment would. All right, you may be thinking, why are we just sitting here watching this mixer go around and around? Great question. I'm such a visual person. I know when I'm just learning a recipe, you know, if it's a written recipe and they say, mix the dough until it forms a ball. Well, okay, what does that look like? I'm trying to show you what this looks like here. The dough is being mixed. All my dry patches are gone. So I'm putting in that next cup of flour. And as you can see, the dough, it's almost mesmerizing. But we do want to add flour until the dough, like I said, forms a ball and cleans the sides of the bowl. So keep watching. I'm going to show you what that looks like. But I do want you to see this process going into it, because this right here might look like, wow, there's way too much flour. But once it's all kneaded in, you'll see that it kneads in very nicely. So keep an eye on this dough and keep watching it. So it should be noted here, I do have the mixer on the very lowest setting. That's the setting that you'll want to do for kneading dough. So as you can see, this dough kind of has a mind of its own. Sometimes it'll come up really high and then go back down low. But if you look really close at the bottom of the bowl, the dough is still sticky. It's still sticking and pulling to the sides of the bowl every time that dough hook goes around. So that is still, it still needs a little bit more flour. If you can look at the very bottom of the bowl, it's sticking there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this dough hook and kind of show you a little bit more. If I take this into my fingers, what this would feel like. It's almost there, but not quite yet. It's still just a little bit sticky. So we're going to go ahead and add just a little bit more flour. I'm going to do a half of a cup this time, because I think that'll just about do it. So as you can see, this dough is beginning to bind together. That is awesome. Now we want to make sure that there's no clumps of dough kind of off by themselves. We want to make sure that this is all just one smooth hunk of dough. So you'll see this as this is coming together here. Now, if your dough starts to kind of bunch up at the top, this is a big recipe that we're making here. You can just stop the dough hook and use your spoon to push that down. Kind of help it out there a little bit, but I don't think we need to add any more flour. I think this is really great here. It just needs a little bit more kneading. So we're going to keep this going here. So as you can see, this dough's getting pretty close here. It is not sticking to the sides of the bowl, rather it is cleaning up the sides of the bowl. It is one round smooth ball, so we can go ahead and take this attachment off. Now I wanted you guys to take a close look at this dough after it's all done. As you can see, it's very smooth and put together. It's also very heavy, but there's no dry patches in there anywhere. It has been thoroughly kneaded. This is perfect. So what you're going to want to do is use a bowl that is at least twice as big as what your dough is. So I'm just going to reuse the same one here. And stick your dough in there, and you want to spray down the sides, because what we're going to do is we're going to let this dough rise, and you want the dough to kind of have a slick side to rise up to kind of help it along there. You don't want it to have that resistance of sticking to the sides of the bowl. So you want to cover this with a towel and put it to sleep like a little baby. I like to put mine in a warm place. If your room temperature is already warm, you can just leave it out on the counter, but it is winter here, so it's pretty chilly in my kitchen. So I turned my oven on very low and then turned it back off again. You want it to just be not more than 100 degrees inside your oven, just so it can have a nice, safe, warm place to rise. So I just kind of left the door cracked and let it rise in there. So here it is. It has been rising for 1 hour. And as you can see, look, it has more than doubled in size. It's all the way up to the top. Just that little hunk of dough has now duplicated itself into this massive hunk of yumminess. Now, in my opinion, this is the most fun part in the whole process. Go ahead and give that dough a punch and let it go down. Now we're going to start forming our rolls here. So you can turn the dough out onto a clean surface and go ahead and prepare whatever pans you're going to use. Now, like I said, this is a make-ahead recipe. We made a massive amount here, so I'm going to make 3 different pans. One pan I'm going to cook up for our supper tonight. The second pan I am going to form the rolls, but then stick the raw dough in the refrigerator to bake tomorrow. And then the third pan, I'm going to form some rolls to then freeze to make at a later date. So I love this recipe. It's so versatile. You can do this whole rising and mixing up process all in one day, but then have rolls for several days. Now, to form the rolls, you'll want to look for a nice smooth part in your dough, and then you're just going to use your thumb and index finger to pinch off a portion. Now underneath, you'll see where it was pinched off, but the top, if you fold the edges down and underneath your roll, the top will be nice and smooth. Just continue this process, turning your dough, looking for a smooth area to pinch off for your roll, and then you can just divide them up amongst your pans, however you plan to bake them, whether that would be today, tomorrow, or put it in your freezer for later. As far as spacing goes, go ahead and place the rolls right comfortably next to each other. Their edges are going to help support one another as they rise up in the baking process. Now this first pan I'm going to go ahead and bake up today, so I am going to go ahead and cover this, put it in a nice warm place, and let it rise for about an hour. We're going to bake it up in just a little bit when I'm finished with my other rolls here. Now here I have going my second pan of rolls. Now as I get towards the end of my dough here, you'll see how I'm folding the edges of the dough underneath to create a smooth top so that I can pinch off my roll. So you can do that towards the end of your dough. And for the second option that we're making ahead for tomorrow, you're just going to cover tightly and stick this in the refrigerator for 4 to 12 hours. And then whenever you are ready to make dinner tomorrow, just make sure to stick them out on the counter for 2 hours to rise, since they're going to be going from cold dough to warm, and then you'll just bake them as directed. And then I'm finishing off this pan here and doing my last pan for my freezer. Now, as you can see, this is just a couple rolls left over for my freezer, which is totally fine. I like to keep a Ziploc bag of dinner rolls in the freezer, so I will flash freeze these. These you'll want to space farther apart and just flash freeze them for an hour. until they are hard, and then you will then put them in a Ziploc bag. Make sure all the air is out, and you can store them in the freezer for several weeks and then get them out to thaw later and rise later and bake up some fresh hot rolls. For this last option, you will want to let them rise on the counter for 3 hours before baking these ones. Now that we're done explaining all 3 options, it is the moment of truth to bake off our actual rolls. They have been rising for an hour, so you want to preheat that oven to 400 degrees. Here they are, nice and risen, still raw, but ready to go in that oven. You'll want to bake this at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 minutes until they're nice and golden like this. Go ahead and rub some butter on those delicious hot rolls. Oh, so good. I hope you guys enjoyed that recipe as much as I do. I just love this recipe. I make it very frequently for my family, and I do all 3 methods. On my mixing day, I always make up some fresh for us to enjoy that evening, and then I put some in the refrigerator. I kind of like just divvy it out however much I need and have some in my freezer for later too. It's just such a versatile recipe and so easy, you guys. It is so easy. So I hope you enjoyed it. Pop back in next week. We're gonna have something extra special. I'm gonna have my husband here with me, and we are gonna talk, finally, the long-awaited promised video about our kitchen. So yes, we did remodel our kitchen, and I know that some of you have been waiting for all the details on that. We're just gonna go ahead and make the video. Our kitchen's not done. As you can see down here in this corner, like, we don't even have our floorboards up yet. Like, we're still like in that phase of remodeling where you finished all the big things, all the annoying things. Like when I didn't have a sink for several weeks, that was an annoying thing. But we have, like, our kitchen is fully functional now, and now it's just the little nitty-gritty things like the baseboards, or like over here, down here, I don't have like the outlet covers on yet, and so there's some wires from the lighting. Our ceiling needs finished painting, but anyway, we're just gonna show it to you guys. Who cares? You guys don't care, right? So pop back on next week. My husband and I will be here, and we're gonna kind of talk through all the things. If this video was at all helpful to you, go ahead and hit that like button, and I do wish that you would subscribe so that we can hang out more. We will see you guys back next week with that special episode with me and my husband talking all about our kitchen, and we'll see you guys then. Bye.
Mom, why are you just showing them how to make rolls? Rolls are yummy.
Yeah, those are yummy.
Yeah, but they're very yummy, but why are they showing you that part? You can just tell them that part. What if you cut that? Oh, look, don't see my elbow. Look.